January 5th, 2022, Oakdale Economic Development Commission meeting. So what I'll do now is we'll go around the room. We'll do a little bit. Well, actually, I'm going to start it out with Frank and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, everybody.
Let's go there.
The flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Frank. All right. Now we'll go around. We'll just get a roll call. Dave's here. Jeff Bates.
Here.
Of the Bobs, we'll go with Bob Ulian.
Yep.
How did I do in the last name?
Good. Very good.
I have no French. Gary Livingston. Frank is here. Stacy is here. Gary Severson.
Here.
Lynn Stafford.
Here.
Bob Stiglich. Aaron Voca. And Holly. Holly just walked in the door. We're good. All right. Approval of minutes from September 1st, 2021. Any questions? We'll keep moving. Actually, should we do a motion to approve them?
Yeah, Severson, I'll move we approve the minutes.
I'll second.
Okay. Minutes approved. According to this, we have a old business, and there is none on the docket. So we're going to keep flying right through. At this point, there was supposed to be a council liaison, but they're under the weather tonight. So we're going to keep moving on, and we're going to move right to the guest speaker for the evening, John Shardlow. The floor is yours.
Well, good evening, Mr. Chairman and members. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
We're good.
Great. Well, it's my pleasure tonight to introduce to you and share the conversation with David Wellington, who's the president and co-owner of Wellington Management, and John Rausch, who is a real estate broker, very active throughout the metropolitan area, but particularly in the East Metro with Cushman Wakefield. So what we wanted to do for a couple of reasons. One, this is your first opportunity to have a meeting with the new community development director. It's the beginning of a new year and a great opportunity to sort of rethink how we do what we do and focus on priorities and so forth. So what I'd like to do to just prime the pump a little bit is just ask a couple of questions of each of our guest speakers, and hopefully we can move on to questions from the commission and a broader conversation after that. Let me just start by saying, for those of you I don't know, I've been a planning consultant in the Twin Cities metropolitan area for 42 years, had my own firm for 25 years, and I've been very active in Oakdale throughout that time period. I've assisted the city with its comprehensive plan at least 3 times. Most recently worked with the community on the Tartan Crossings project where the High-V is, and the Willowbrook development that's under construction now, and several other small area projects. So it's been my pleasure to work with the city for a long time. During the interim period here, I've been sort of serving as the city's interim community development director to keep the lights on until Andy got here. So I'm relieved that the reinforcements have crested the hill and he's in his seat. So just to kick things off, David, if you would please give the commissioners just a quick summary of what Wellington Management is in general and what your role as Director of Acquisitions and Development includes. And in particular, if you could focus on kind of what your involvement is and has been in the East Metro, that would be good.
Yeah, thanks, John. I appreciate the invite, and thank you, commissioners, for the time and hopefully some attention that I can keep with regard to, East Metro activities for Wellington Management. The company's been around for almost 40 years. My dad started in 1985. I was kind of crawling around his ankles at that point, as you can probably imagine. I started with the company about 8 years ago. Before that, I was working institutional commercial real estate brokerage out in Seattle for the office sales team that sold large institutional office properties to institutional owners. Wellington Management is primarily a commercial real estate management company. We own and manage about 4 million square feet of commercial real estate in the Twin Cities. We have significant holdings in some of your neighboring communities, including Woodbury. We have about 600 tenants, commercial tenants in our portfolio. About 80 of those are retail tenants in Woodbury. We have about 250,000 square feet of retail property in Woodbury nearby. We're also looking hard at an acquisition right now that is looking like it's going to go, and we're excited about in Oakdale. So we believe strongly in Oakdale's story, and we're long-term holders of property. I'm going to hopefully be sitting in my chair for a long time. We have a kind of a broad variety of real estate in the portfolio. It's not just retail, it's also office and industrial and market rate and affordable housing. We do quite a bit of development work as well. But it's about 40 of us on staff. I run the company with Steve, my dad, who is kind of in his twilight years, but still running strong, and happy to engage with you guys with regard to what we're seeing in the marketplace in the Eastern Metro, particularly what we're seeing with regard to retail and COVID and how to attract solid retail tenants to, important institutional mixes. So I guess that's kind of the big high level for why I'm here and what I'd like to talk about.
Great. John Roush, you're a broker with Cushman Wakefield and obviously active throughout the metropolitan area. I know you do a lot of work in the South Metro and working in North Metro, but I've run into you many times in the last couple of years in East Metro and Lake Elmo and Woodbury and most recently in Oakdale, where you're currently representing some major property owners. So if you could just flesh out that background a little bit and give the commissioners a sense of what your perspective is.
Sure thing. So I've been a commercial real estate broker for about 24 years now, and now I just focus on land. So I assist companies like Amazon and Ziegler, Caterpillar, Samstone, Ryan Companies, Opus, Ryan, the folks that are looking to build industrial buildings. I help land sellers and buyers, like Wellington, for instance, purchase land for multifamily and single family. I think we've probably done about 5,000 units of apartments in the entire metro over the last 3 years, and of which I think about 3,000 have been in Woodbury, Lake Elmo, and the rest of the East Metro. So my real focus has been on assisting people, whether it's David and his father, or Amazon, or the Comerica Bank selling Prince's land and the west side of town, and buying or selling dirt. So that's really been my my focus over the last 23 and a half years. Also, point of interest, I was told, and I'm not sure this is true, but we developed the Hilltop Business Center, which is 125,000 square feet in Oakdale at 36 and 694, which we think is the largest industrial building in the city of Oakdale until somebody else tells me differently. So,
stick to your story.
I'll stick to it. We're not going to let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Yeah, that's good.
But anyway.
So the broad theme of the conversation we want to have tonight really has to do with kind of what is the optimal, in your opinion, what's the optimal role and what's the most positive role that an advisory commission for economic development can play in a city. They're both people who need to interact with cities on a regular basis. You obviously have had both positive and negative experiences interacting with cities. And so just kind of focusing on, what have been those best experiences and how could the city of Oakdale learn from that? So I've just broken it down into some questions, and we'll just kind of rifle through them again in the interest of just kind of getting the ball rolling. How important is it for cities to have and maintain accurate information about available land, about the state of its infrastructure, about other pending projects, and about community priorities?
Yeah. David, do you mind if I take this one? So John, David, and I, we talked here a couple of days ago just to make sure we didn't cross paths, like the Ghostbusters midstream. But, one of the biggest things that I've reflected on since that conversation is that regardless of how much we want a project, whether it's, and I work throughout the entire metro, I do focus quite a bit on the cities that do have available land, like Woodbury, Lake Elmo, and so forth. But you guys cannot pick the tenants that you want exactly. You can pick the land uses, and you can guide it, and you can provide infrastructure and provide support. If you really, really want something, you can provide TIF, but you cannot dictate what's going to go where. The market will dictate that. They'll come knocking on your door. A really kind of a good, bad example is what's going on up the I-35E corridor. They think really falsely so, that they need a data center up the 35E corridor. The data center world does not want to be there. It's just not a good spot for it. It's in a tornado zone. A tornado, it went through, the Hugo, Lino Lakes area. You don't have the infrastructure and so forth. But they got a committee, and they're spending a lot of money on trying to attract data centers. We have talked to the data center folks, and they're not going to go there based upon what they know today. There's better alternatives. So when we're representing clients looking for sites like Amazon, for instance, they have things that they need. They need labor, they need good access to the interstate system, and they need a 360 draw. So they need to draw or be able to distribute their goods, in a 360-degree radius. A bad example of that is when Target built a site up on Lake Drive in Lino Lakes. They only had a 180 draw. The rest of the land to the north and to the east was swamp, and they didn't think about that. So I guess to let the market, the message here is to let the market forces really push the requirement. If you guys push too hard, you're going to artificially subsidize some uses that probably won't have too much longevity in your community.
To respond, so I agree with what John said, and I think just to put a finer point on it, we work in a variety of different communities in the Twin Cities, some nearby you and some not at all. And frankly, I don't know that having a really snazzy website that has the latest and greatest data with regard to what land is potentially viable from a private seller perspective is going to be all that helpful. Folks who are trying to acquire property like us, or tenant reps that are representing big users or big animals like Amazon or whoever else that are working in a marketplace are going to have a bunch of sophisticated data and information, and frankly, staff in-house to be able to generate that information for their own decision making. And so I think spending a ton of money and energy on trying to kind of get somebody 5% of the way there is probably not going to be all that beneficial from a spend for you guys. And frankly, that data is pretty accessible in the brokerage community, and kind of what brokerage houses are paid for and a big piece of their value add. So that to me feels like not a huge opportunity. I do think, making it known where there's land that is potentially available that the city owns, I think is actually super helpful. And your linkage with a strong economic development staff person like Andy, I think is really critical. And so to me, when we find the most success is when there's effectively at least some level of clarity. It doesn't need to be unanimity from a board like yours, but clarity with regard to what the city's broad interests are and how they're being represented. And that is communicated relatively clearly. That feedback's communicated relatively clearly to the economic development agency or group within the city, and that staff person or that team can turn around and then provide really clear guidance to developers like us or brokers like John that have an idea and maybe potentially a user or a use, and we think it might work in this location. We kind of need to get some guidance as to whether or not additional infrastructure is going to be needed, or zoning is going to be a problem, or the planners are going to give us a buzzsaw on our plan 9 months into our project. And so that's kind of the big message I would provide.
So we talk about community development being a relationship-based process. How important is it to both of you to have solid relationships in the cities in which you're exploring projects. Spokespeople who you can trust, who you know will have a clear understanding, not only of the facts and the process, but also of the elected officials' priorities.
So, John, what David just said, and I'll say it differently because I work in just a little different part of the world, of the real estate world than him. One of the things that my clients ask me is, how good of a handle does the economic development guy, Andrew, for instance, have on the city council? Is he aligned with the city council? If we go to the city council and we get voted down after the staff, made recommendation for a project, and after the EDA and the planning commission all endorsed it, and if we get buzzsawed at the city council, that message goes out loud and clear to the real estate community. And this stuff happens all over town, and it's very, very well known. Because if I bring a project to David in whatever community, and it's known that it really doesn't matter what the staff or the EDAC committee or what the planning commission says, nobody's going to talk to them. We're going to go talk directly to the city council members, the guys that are making the decisions and the women that are making the decisions, and we're going to get their opinion. We're going to bypass all the rest of them. So I think what you're asking, John, is how important is that? That process is super important. And the ambassador, the doorman, the decision maker, the person that we rely on the most is the staff, the economic development coordinator and the city manager and so forth. And that message that they're conveying to the world must be aligned to the city council, or you're going to go in circles. People won't waste their money because it costs a lot of money to make an application. Sometimes, David, I know you spent a couple $100,000 to get to the point where you can make an application. And if that's just going to get thrown out the door at the whim of some of the council members, you're not going to see the deals.
Anything to add to that, David?
No, I totally agree. We're actively and aggressively looking at projects right now in communities where there's more favorable winds than some of the communities that we've worked in recently, where the winds have shifted politically. I think it's no secret that Minneapolis and St. Paul has seen very significant upheaval with regard to the uprising, and we lost 35 million in real estate in the fires, and we were well insured, so we're kind of back at it. But we're looking in areas that are a little bit more politically aligned with new development projects, and there are some communities that are more open for business than others, and it's not a secret in the development world where you want to go to work.
And if David wants to buy a property that I'm trying to sell, at some point I'm going to require some hard earnest money from him in the contract, and he's going to have to pay that money prior to getting a decision from the city. And if it's a flip of the coin as to whether or not he's going to get approval at the city council level, and again, the planning commission's an advisory board, and the EDAC is too, typically in most cities. But that's factoring in, and that's a strike against you if you guys don't have some continuity there.
Well, I don't have the expertise that you guys have, but from my perspective, it seems like the general market in Oakdale right now is as hot as I have ever seen it in my career. Could you comment on that and explain what the forces are that are making that market so hot right now?
David, go ahead.
Well, I think there's a lot of things going on. I think we're seeing a flight back out to the suburbs, where we've seen a flight into the urban core since the Great Recession, and the last 3 to 5 years, there's been kind of a market exit to kind of first and second ring suburbs, which I think Oakdale is favorably responding to in a great way. And I think, frankly, neighbors to the west of Oakdale are helping Oakdale push that demand and those demand drivers into Oakdale. I think Oakdale is doing a really good job of making it relatively easy to get higher density rooftops in certain parts of the community, which is then providing the base of wallets and the density of wallets with folks with disposable income that make the retailers feel a lot more confident that this is a place to invest. So I think it's really a combination of a couple of things. Also, I think there's quite a bit of land effectively still remaining, where other neighbors like Woodbury that have seen pretty significant growth over the last 20 or 30 years is kind of running out of opportunities. And so the bubble is getting squeezed towards Oakdale in a great way. As I mentioned, we're actively attempting to acquire a retail center in Oakdale, and we feel very positively about the story in Oakdale, and feel like there's a lot of headroom with regard to the growth that we perceive as opportunity in Oakdale.
A little different slant on this, John, and it might not be the question you asked, but so we currently are working with the Amazon folks, and we just did a larger deal over in Woodbury, and there's another one going on in Lake Elmo, and throughout the metro we have several more going on. But people's buying trends have changed significantly in the last 2 years, especially with the advent of COVID. Now, my family, for instance, we were kind of forced to understand how to use Amazon and other online ordering techniques. And when we order these, there's a last mile distribution center that Amazon has. They have the sortation facilities, which are the large ones like they have in Shakopee, for instance, which is 2.45 million square feet. Stuff comes from throughout the world. It comes to that facility. And then based on their algorithms and ordering, it goes to these last mile facilities. These last mile facilities are then going to go to John's house, every one of your houses, and David's house. It doesn't come from Shakopee, the 2.45 million square foot facility. So we got a number of different sites that we're working on right now, throughout the metro. We follow that 494 loop, and we try to, figure out where there's gaps. So what that has done to the industrial world of real estate, first of all, it drove the vacancy rate down to about below 4%. It's about 3.6% right now in the Northeast Metro, which is Oakdale, Lake Elmo, north of 494. And that's the healthiest that it's ever been, honestly. So the vacancy rates within the industrial real estate market are significantly lower than they've ever been. And we're seeing rent growth, significant rent growth for the first time in my career. Every little investment update I've been to, they said the rates are $850 and $450, that sort of thing. $850 for office space, $450 for warehouse space. Now it's $12 and $6, $12 per square foot per year for the office space, $6 per square foot per year for the warehouse space. And that's just because, it's the supply and demand. It just doesn't exist. And if you want to stay in business and operate out of a warehouse, that's what you got to pay.
I've been personally a little surprised by how robust the response has been to transit-oriented development sites along the Gold Line. I was a little thinking we needed to wait to see on that, but really very favorably impressed by how the market seems to be pursuing that. Curious to know your thoughts about that.
I think, David, this is more yours.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me too much. I mean, I think we're seeing, we have a couple of housing projects that are kind of mixed income, market rate, light, not luxury product in the urban core in St. Paul, Minneapolis, that are frankly not doing as well as we were hoping from a lease-up perspective. And we're seeing very strong tailwinds in suburban markets, particularly on light rail lines. But bus lines would be kind of your next best option, and frankly are somewhat easier in some ways from a ridership perspective. So it just doesn't have the same sex appeal, but I think it's a better investment for the city and the state and the counties. And so we're actively looking in the East Metro for housing sites and in Woodbury and Oakdale, and feel like these are communities that are growing and need more density. And there is a very strong demand for attainable housing that is effectively for workforce or folks that are my age or a little bit younger that don't have the means to be able to acquire homes or have a variety of different reasons in their lifestyle that they don't want to own a home. And I think that they're seeking out opportunities in communities like Oakdale.
So what I do is sell land. I mentioned that earlier. And the lead time to shovel in the ground is so important to these developers. And if you guys want to position yourselves ahead of other communities, you got to figure out how to shorten that lead time to getting the shovel in the ground. Right now, it's probably 2 years if you want to take a run at a site in most cities. And if the zoning doesn't match the comp plan, then it's, for sure 2 years. But if you really want to, put yourself above others, some call it shovel ready, whatever it is, but you need to make it very clear to the development community that if they bring a project in of whatever sort it is, that you're ready, willing to go, that you're going to come in, you're going to hear their application, you're going to see it, you're going to streamline it. I think the city of Lake Elmo, for instance, they even did away with one of the work sessions that was typically required, for as far as an application goes. So that's something that if you were to try to encourage development, you can make that clear to the world that you are willing to, I'm going to call it streamline, but legally, John, according to your rules, get these developers to shovel in the ground. And the other thing that people oftentimes forget is you can't build. People don't typically start putting shovels in the ground this time of year, December, January, February, March. Nobody wants to close on property. They want to close, once the road restrictions are off, once they can start digging, when the asphalt plants are still open. They all close in November, by the way. So we don't see a lot of closings happen December, January, February for developers that want to get shovels in the ground immediately.
So, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, these are two individuals who are very knowledgeable about this market and actively involved in making investments and furthering community development. So whatever questions you might want to put to either of those, this would be the time.
So I've got a question in regards to, thank you, gentlemen, for your input. So the Oakdale station, Oakdale Marketplace over there by Target, McDonald's, all that, a lot of Oakdale residents are asking, when are we getting a restaurant? When are we getting a Panera's, all that kind of thing over in that zone? So what is it that's not appealing, or why haven't we got one in there now, in your opinions?
Well, John Roush happens to be the broker for that property, so he could probably tell you.
Well, I'm trying to sell the 16 acres, which is right south of LA Fitness there. I'm not selling the land immediately adjacent to Target, but there's the virus is out, and John, hopefully you don't have it. I see you wiping your nose. There are a number of restaurants sitting dark right now, and you can't force a restaurant to build a new restaurant facility. It's going to cost them $4.5 million, David. I think we agreed on when we were having our call the other day. And to pay the rent on a $4.5 million ground up restaurant, it's going to be extremely expensive. Steaks and whatever, and you need people to come and shop. And if you look at that Oakdale station, you're not just drawing from Oakdale. You need a 360 draw. You got DeMontreville, you got Lake Elmo, you got cornfields, and unfortunately, the farmers can only come and eat so much steak. So you need to have a draw, and they need to be able to pay the rent, and they actually at some point need to be able to even make some money. Would you go in and would you subsidize it and, give them the land and give them TIF and all that? I don't think that's sustainable. That's a short-term fallacy that won't get you a good restaurant that wants to be, that's going to succeed there. Right now, residential wants to be there. Multifamily residential really, really wants to be in that 16 acres south of LA Fitness. The market's there for it. Those will be people that are going to want to go eat at that restaurant. They're going to want to shop at Target. They're going to want to make that area sustainable. Chicken and the egg. Do you put the restaurant there first and hope that residential comes? Probably not going to work. You put the residential there first, and then, will restaurants come to serve them? Yeah. What kind of restaurant? I don't know. The market will decide that. It's really hard for anybody, the EDAC committee, city council, planning commission, to say we want a white tablecloth restaurant. And that's the only one that can be there. John, I don't even know how you do that within the zoning and if it's legal.
I know that Andy's going to be giving you an update on a number of projects in the community. We're actively working with John and the people he's representing. There are a couple of challenges that are in the way right now. One is the capacity in the sanitary sewer lift station. There's only enough capacity in the lift station and the downstream trunk to serve about 115 residential units. And the developer that is interested in the property is interested to 2 to 3 times that much. And also the creek, Raleigh Creek, that runs through that area has contamination associated with the 3M settlement. And so there's going to have to be some brownfield cleanup work done there before that property is put on the market as well, or before it's finally developed.
Is that
So,
something?
Just a little bit of a different angle. We are actively developing a couple of 100 acres of land in Blaine, some of which we've worked on with John. It's just at the 109th in Lexington, or just off 35 to the northwest of 35 there at Lexington. And it's mixed use, so we're selling some of the land to Lennar for 250 or some odd units of homes that they're building in a couple of phases, and then we're building about 35 acres of commercial property. We've commenced with, we've delivered a first phase, and we have several more phases to come, and we have some apartments that are coming as well. It's very challenging to dictate the uses on that land, even though we are patient, we have the capital, we are land developers, we're experienced, we have the network of tenant rep brokers. We think we understand where the market is. It's just very difficult for us to kind of define who's going to be where. And we have to make hard decisions on a pretty regular basis about who we want to sell to and whether or not that's the right mix of use in that location, if it adheres to Blaine's guidance and code and aspirations. And there's kind of a variety of different factors at play. So I just would echo that the market will bear what the market will bear. It's very difficult to say, thou shalt have a Panera right here. We do have a Panera in our Bellwood property on Radio Drive. The benefit that we have of the Panera in that location is, it's in a good location. It has good visibility to the street. It does not have a drive-through. We've actually gone round and round with them on putting in a drive-through. It would be very beneficial for them. And they like drive-throughs a lot, and drive-throughs have become more important in COVID. But we have the benefit of building that property in 1993, and the construction costs and low basis of the construction costs of 1993 versus today's dollars. And obviously, it's taken a lot of cash for us to keep that property looking decent and up to date over time. But we have much lower basis than construction costs are now. As John mentioned, it's very expensive to go build a restaurant. We just had, a 1,500 footer priced out for Dunkin' up in Blaine, and it's $800 a foot. And, we probably built our stuff on Radio Drive in Woodbury for less than $100 a foot. It just is a very different environment. And so, the restaurants have to solve for that equation. We have to solve for that equation. We have to get the banks comfortable with solving for that equation. That's kind of all that's tied into that. We have a similar situation kind of in the western part of Woodbury, where we have an even older property, and we've had to re-tenant. Now it's on Diamo, but it's a white tablecloth restaurant, and it's kind of on its, I think, 4th rendition. And, sometimes it's really about the concept and how strong the concept is and how good, the business person who's running that business is. And so most of the time when we're trying to evaluate whether or not we're going to lease a space to an operator like that, we're interviewing the operator, trying to understand whether or not they understand how to run a business, not whether or not they're good at cooking steaks. And that's kind of the nuance of running kind of an older shopping center, older inline retail that isn't for the faint of heart and requires a lot of capital and a lot of guesswork and a lot of risk taking.
The final thing I'd say about that, Mr. Chairman, is that Forefront Development immediately to the north is currently going through an amendment to their planned unit development for the retail portion of their development that will front on the roadway. And we're talking with them about what are appropriate uses within that retail portion of their PUD. So they're certainly aware of the community's interest in seeing quality restaurants in that area.
What about the property due east of Target? It's over in Lake Elmo, so it's just across the street. It didn't get farmed this year, so it makes sense that the owner of the property has got some other ideas. Does anybody know what's going on with that?
Yeah, I'm actually working on that with a company called North Point. They're an industrial developer. They're doing about 1.5 million square feet right now down in Cottage Grove. And they have a purchase agreement. So the city of Lake Elmo owns it. So they did an RFP. I don't feel that was a very good way to sell the property, by the way. They didn't hire a broker, and I don't say that self-serving, that we got enough to do. But, I mean, they got a group from out of town that's never done development within the Twin Cities before, and they're a very quality developer, but they're the only ones that actually found the RFP. I'm selling, probably 1,000 acres in the city of Lake Elmo right now, and I didn't even know about it. Anyway, this out-of-town group told me about it. We got them in there. They proposed 500,000 square feet of industrial. They're going through an AUAR process. I'm 80% sure on this. I think it actually might have triggered an EIS, an environmental impact statement. But the AUAR, I think, is, John, area-wide urban assessment review, which is a required document that needs to be completed by the applicant in conjunction with the city, which has traffic studies, environmental, and so forth. So that's really slowing those guys down. They wanted to be building this spring, but unfortunately, they're not going to be able to. So if the city of Oakdale had some land that was going to be industrial, that was going to trigger an AUAR, John, you can speak to this stuff, better than I can. That will shorten the lead time to shovel in the ground. And again, that's a theme you're going to hear from me, because when we get these guys that come to town and they want to do larger distribution deals or industrial projects or office projects or housing projects, and they have to do these AUARs, EIS, or an environmental assessment worksheet, that puts them out maybe another season, maybe an additional 12 months. And Amazon can't think that far ahead. Most housing developers can't think that far ahead. Developers just, they don't know who's going to hop in front of them, if they got to go ahead and do that stuff. But you're going to see about 750,000 square feet just to the east of you, just to the east of the Target building and the other side of Ideal. They have to bring the sewer and water, or maybe just sewer, up underneath the railroad tracks. And then that should trigger development. They're ready to go right now. The developer is. So there's a little bit of chicken and the egg, or a little game of chicken going on between that particular deal and the United Properties guys doing the out front deal in front of the old Amation campus.
Anybody else?
Now, the AUAR is just an alternative way of doing an EIS, and a lot of communities are opting to do AUARs proactively. We did that in the city of Cottage Grove, in the area where North Point is currently developing. And the city did that so that they could essentially save time between when the applicant came to the community and when they were able to get it in the ground. And the city of Oakdale's already done environmental review proactively. So that's something we did in Willowbrook, for instance.
Because this process we're talking about doesn't exist in all parts of the United States. And again, Amazon, just as an example, well known, when they come to town, first of all, they don't have the wetland issues that we have here. So they don't know about having to do a wetland delineation prior to doing they didn't, before we did the first one in Shakopee. So now they know they got to do a wetland delineation. And now they also understand that if their square footage is greater than whatever it's required in each individual community, that they have to do an EAW or an AUAR. So they won't select certain land sites unless that stuff is done. And the industrial market right now is as hot as I've ever seen it in my life, which real estate, I've only been paying attention for 23, 24 years. So I've been through a boom time, a recession, a boom time, and I think we're still in a boom time right now.
Other questions?
I had a question about, you had mentioned, how do communities express their interests, their availability, their streamlined processes? How do they communicate? What's the best way for them to communicate to that, to brokers like yourself?
Could barely hear what was said, but I think I heard, how have other communities streamlined their development review and approval process? Is that what?
No, so I'll try again. Is this better? Can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay. What is the best way for a community to communicate or get the word out as far as streamlined processes, EIS already done, or what their interest is? I know zoning is probably the primary way, but are there ways they can communicate some of those things that would make it attractive?
Where's Andrew?
I'm over here. I can hear you.
That's it. That's your guy. You put him on the website, call Andrew, got a project.
Single point of contact. I think that the whole idea of a single point of contact and somebody who actually can speak knowledgeably and clearly about what the community's aspirations are is important. I think to the extent that the opportunity represents itself, to be proactive about the city of Oakdale has been quite proactive about special area studies and small area studies where work with the landowners to kind of lay out what the plan should be for the area and do the zoning, the plan unit development, have it in place. And to the extent that you can have the environmental review done ahead of time. Again, I'm not going to digress much, but in Cottage Grove, we're the consultants down there as well. And the city got a call from Department of Employment and Economic Development saying there's a business of statewide significance that's going to put a 300-acre industrial development somewhere in the metropolitan area, and they want to be able to, they don't want to wait. And so will you do an AUAR proactively? And it turned out to be a Google data center that went to Iowa. But in the meantime, the city of Cottage Grove did that AUAR, and the AUAR is in place for anything that's up to, equal to, or less than the intensity of the development that was studied in that AUAR. And so that's why when North Point came to Cottage Grove, they were able to move forward without having to take the time to redo that environmental review.
From a developer's perspective, it speaks volumes if we have a project that we are trying to do due diligence on, maybe if tied up land via a letter of intent or even potentially sign a purchase agreement. But really at the letter of intent stage, we'll call, the economic development person like Andrew and say, can we have a meeting? And if Andrew then has the authority to bring in, the director of public works, other folks that might have an impact on permitting, design, traffic concerns, engineering concerns, other planners into one meeting, that's a huge signal that the city is actively and aggressively trying to recruit development. If we have to go hand in hand individually and set up those meetings separately and be the Sherpa of a project and trying to get city staff to talk to each other about a project, it just sends a different message. And so if that process can be streamlined, it's a really positive signal to us.
And for me, one of the main things we do, guys, we don't get salaries. We don't get paid by the hour. We want to get deals done and as quickly as possible. So one of my first calls is to the mayor. And, if we'll talk to the community development director if we know they're strong and if we know that they actually carry the message for the community. But there's nothing prohibiting people like me or David or Steve or any other person that wants to make a, $50, $60, $70, $100 million investment in a community. There's nothing prohibiting us from calling, the decision makers. But we would much rather prefer to speak to one point of contact that does speak for the entire group and carries the water for us. That would be huge, huge, huge. And there are some communities that do that and have that mechanism really streamlined, and they see great success.
Well, and I want to be clear in saying that we don't ever want to be fast for the sake of being fast and do it in a slipshod way. We want to be crystal clear with people about what the requirements are, what all the permits are, what all the procedures are, and be able to lay that out and help people move through that process. But we don't want to skip steps or end up doing, low quality development. That's not the reputation you want, and it's not a good long-term strategy. So our hope and our advice is that with Andy and his new tenure as the community development director, that you can build a team that can support him as that single point of contact.
And John, I hope I didn't, convey this message poorly, but when I come to a community, whether it's Minnetonka, Chanhassen, Minneapolis, Oakdale, Woodbury, whomever it is, we think, the client thinks that when we got a comp plan, which, is the guiding land use, and if that differs a little bit from the current zoning, the comp plan guides, we think that's been thought through. And we think that if we come in with something that's going to meet that requirement, we think and we hope that that's going to be supported. If there's dissension, and we go back and we watch these city council meetings, and we all know, the buyers do anyway, and developers and brokers, where there is dissension, and we know, and we poll each one of the council members on these projects. I mean, when we're talking about doing a $200, $300 million project, that's significant. We don't want to go and finally get, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 into a project like in Woodbury, Ryan did with Amazon, and the AUAR was already done. By the time they got through that application, they had over $1 million spent. And if there was a chance that they were going to get denied at the city council level, I don't think that project would have gone there.
Yes, Andy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. If David, John, can you guys hear me all right? I'm on the other. All right, I just wanted to first say thanks I appreciate the importance you put in the role of a community development director and a really solid staff to help guide the development community. We do have a group of people who are volunteering their times with expertise in a lot of different areas and really good knowledge of the community on here. What do you see as a role for a group like the EDC in that development process? Where do they really help, and where may it not necessarily be the right fit?
I mean, I think from my perspective, city council members may not have, as much depth potentially. I'm sorry that I don't know the makeup of the city council and the mayor with regard to their depth of expertise in the business community. But I imagine the folks sitting around the table there have quite a bit more depth and expertise and history in the business community, which is part of the reason why they're sitting on the committee. So I think using that depth and expertise to fill in the blanks for folks on the city council is, to me, kind of paramount, and maybe be a translator to a certain extent for, the folks like me and John who are, frequently speaking a very different language than folks in the city council or elected office or people in the community, frankly, that are just looking for a dang Panera, please. And it's just like that, trying to connect the dots between, the world that we're in, which is very different than the world of responding to, consumers and the civic base that has elected the officials that are representing them that's sometimes a pretty big chasm to try to cross. And so I would think that really at the end of the day that that's the big thing, is trying to communicate across that gap and filling in the blanks where it's really needed, and then backing Andy up and his staff up, and also providing clear feedback where he and his staff are maybe going in a direction that is counter to what you guys are seeing in the community or you're hearing from the city council.
I actually served on several different advisory boards and the Economic Development Authority of a community in you know, the best thing that I think can come out of a good EDAC community, and I don't know anybody's makeup here, so I'm just going to say this completely objectively, is to have however many people you're going to have, 5 or 4 or whatever, come from different parts of the world. You know, you get a real estate broker, you get a painter, you get a farmer, you get a whatever, you know, just different, with different backgrounds, and provide input, not agendas, not personal agendas, but you provide input. And, you know, and you guys probably speak up to the planning commission, and then they speak up to the city council. And the only way that it's effective is if indeed, maybe there's some crossover too. The planning commission and EDAC members are, you know, cross-pollinating here, but they got to at least listen to you and acknowledge you. Whether you're wrong or right, or it doesn't matter, but they got to take your input. And if you have 5 real estate brokers on the EDAC board, that's not going to work.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Yeah, and I would just say I've been around a lot of cities for a long time, and the cities that I see that are successful are those that have advisory commissions that are actually empowered to do something, where you have an annual work program and the council asks you to look into these things, and you come back with recommendations. You make your recommendation. Ultimately, it's their decision, but it's not just an ad hoc, let's get together and schmooze about, you know, what we individually think is important. I think it's important for the city to be thoughtful about what are the key economic development challenges and opportunities that faces this community going forward. And the commission can recommend to the council the things that you look at in working with Andy and other staff members. You know, what are the things we think the council or the commission could advise the council on? But I think building that relationship where you're empowered to go do the research, to have the debates, and to come back with a recommendation is how you can support the city best.
And I'll also say that, you know, I've been working on this project over by LA Fitness for 10 years, maybe longer, until John got involved to really provide some direction as to what we could actually do there. And again, I got almost 24 years of experience doing this. I really didn't know what we could actually put there. The PUD was poorly written, and we just didn't really have great direction. So I'll give you guys all a bunch of credit for bringing John in and providing a little direction and clarity, and for doing this. I mean, I've got no agenda here tonight. It's just, you know, I respect John, and I like the city of Oakdale, and David Wellington showed up, and I figured, you know, this would be a great opportunity to, you know, be able to take the floor a little bit and share some of the stuff that we're seeing in the world. But great job for at least taking the initiative to, you know, push the city forward. It sure feels like it.
Well, thank you so much for all of you for spending time tonight with us. Has anybody else got any other questions? If not, really, thank you again for enlightening us on how the real world of real estate and that works over here.
Well, our phone numbers, I think, are on John has them. So if anybody individually ever wants to talk offline, you know, feel free to give a jingle. Glad to do it.
Yeah, thanks for your time and attention on this.
See ya. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
And I digress. I really should have introduced Andy prior to because of the name. It did come up quite a bit, Andy. Good for you. So Andy Getzloff, he is our new Community Development Director. And with that, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's great to be here in front of the commission this evening. Yeah, we've got a lot of work cut out for us, and I'm excited to jump right in. A little bit about my background. You know, I come into community development through maybe a little different path than the traditional. I did start in city planning, consulting in my earlier years, and then probably the last 12, 15 years, I've been working on transportation projects, namely big, complex transit projects. One of those being Gold Line when I was at Washington County for 6 years, and then the last 6 years at Ramsey County managing the Purple Line. So both, roughly $500 million projects that have their own complexities that aren't just about transit, but are about, as we see from some of the development happening here, it's about connecting communities and creating spaces. And, I think this is a great opportunity to take a lot of those regional skills, partnerships, and things that I have, and to bring those to the city level and to work with great groups like this committee and our other volunteer committees at the city and the council to help move things forward. And it really is an exciting time. I feel like my career, I've been kind of fighting on the East Metro for investments, whether they're public sector investments or being that loud voice for the private sector to come here and invest. And I think finally people are listening, and there's development and there's things happening. It all seems to be happening like the same month, but we'll get through that. We'll as a lot of good advice here tonight that we'll take back, and we'll be deliberate in bringing things forward, but also be, speedy and reflective of what the private market is looking for. And to help with that too, it was alluded that it's not just me; it's a staff. Right now, we have just our one planner that's focused on the environmental, or our community development specialist on the environmental side, Shannon. But we have a posting out there for the city planner position, which would be a pretty critical nuts and bolts type role to move all these projects through the pipeline, as well as to plan for the future, small area plans, things like that. So that position's out there, and we're going to start interviewing later this month on that. And then within, I'd say this week yet, the other community development specialists that we'll have focused on economic development, that posting is going to go out as well. So we're going to try to get our staff fully geared up by, maybe by the end of February here, and we'll be rolling and moving forward. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Has anybody got any questions for Andy? I know Stillwater guy, right?
Yes.
So you got to drive right by here. So
Absolutely.
Any questions at all?
I have maybe a comment, and I really appreciate. I learned more in this just informational thing than I've learned. I learned as far as real estate and how the city works. I mean, and I think that it's a critical piece that we know that, because I've always felt that there's more this commission could be doing. And I think, like he had mentioned, being more involved with at least what is being considered and in the works and earlier in the processes, because right now my experience has been we find out after usually they're breaking ground, or maybe the deal has been closed, and that's interesting to me. But it feels like there's no value added in the diversity of experiences and knowledge that we have that we're adding. All we're doing is kind of nodding as we hear what has already taken place. And I think there's opportunities there for this organization to be leveraged better.
Yeah, I think with Dave, with that is if we can just be valued to where we can come back with a recommendation at that point in the decision making, give our opinion. Obviously the city council is going to do what they're going to do, but to have a voice to let them know prior to that decision being made would give us a value as far as why we're spending our hours here in the evenings. So I would say,
Mr. Chair, I might add in response to that, a lot of the stuff that's happening out there right now was groundwork laid 5-10 years ago in the framework documents and the investment, and that's something too that we can focus on and start to involve the EDC in, is things like Glenbrook, the area up by Fleet Farm, and all the different types of uses there. There's a lot of interest out there right now, but we haven't really done the planning there to give the proper guidance. So if somebody comes in, it probably is a 2-year process, and how do we speed that up? And I think those studies and some of that earlier framework is another opportunity for this commission to provide input.
Yeah, that'd be great. Anything else at all, Andy?
I did have a short presentation on development projects.
What a good timing for that.
Yeah, and a lot of these have actually been covered today, so I am going to roll through them. Certainly ask me questions, and my number one answer will probably be great question. I'll have to get back to you on that because this is only day 5. But do want to give you a perspective of what's going on out there, what's in the pipeline, because a big thing is about connecting dots and seeing, maybe if there's something that's an interest to EDC or we should be thinking about. I really do value that feedback. So with that,
Well, why don't we do this? We're going to, right after that, we're going to do a commissioner's update.
okay.
If the commissioners could, if you see a project, you have a question, write it down so Andy can get through it, and then when we come around the table, you can field the question to him. Sound good?
Absolutely. The first thing I'm starting with is 2021, a look back of what's been started or what's been completed. The home furniture site is basically it's under construction at the old movie theater right now, which is I don't know how you guys did it, but moving business from Woodbury to Oakdale is a pretty huge accomplishment.
Well, it's pretty easy. Woodbury, Oakdale.
Yeah, all the time. But another thing that's out there too is there's a pad site out there that could be another future redevelopment site. I think that's one of the themes with commercial is how much has it been overparked in the years, and looking at opportunities to provide those infill options. Another thing that's out there, if you're driving it, it's under construction, is the Animal Emergency and Referral Center of Minnesota. Expanding their facility, and construction is started out there as well. And that is at 1160 Helmo, right next to the Slumberland. Public Works project, new city water treatment facility is needed with all the growth and to meet the increased demand, and then water quality standards that are ever evolving. And it is building on the current water tower site at 1265 Helmo Avenue. Eagle Point Elementary, the school district began construction of the school in fall 2020, and it's going to continue through winter 2022. And the school is being built basically behind the existing school, and when that's complete, the old school is going to be demolished with the idea that the new school opens in fall of 2022. And if you're like myself, with young kids, new elementary schools and investments there are also great ways to advertise the community. The next, more of a plan that's, and actually I probably put this more in the looking forward, is the bike and pedestrian plan. Again, if we're looking at assets that a community has, Oakdale's got a great bike and ped network now. There's gaps in it, and the plan that's been done is pretty dated, and it's a good time to go back and look at that. I know that some of that work has been started pre-COVID, but there's more work yet to be done. So we're putting that in here as a resuming in 2022, and we'll I would suspect once that gets going, we'll want some input from this group as well. So looking forward, what's in the official pipeline? What are some of the ideas out there that aren't quite as was mentioned before, that aren't quite there at approvals yet, but are coming up? There's a few of them. I hinted at Glenbrook Small Area Plan before. This has been in discussions for quite a while about some more, the old golf course that's no longer in business. You've got a number of different types of uses. You've got infrastructure investments with Hadley Avenue being done, and Century Avenue again being the next in the queue there. A lot of interest out there. This is something that getting a hold of early, getting a plan together so that the private market can then have a good idea of what the city is looking for. So that's a priority again to get that going this year. Forefront, we talked about, or I should say, John Charlo talked about this before, that There is some industrial development, warehouse going on the western end of the site, but that there was that PUD amendment to allow for more retail type uses, which is really a great sign and can activate that site. And if you haven't been there in a while, it's pretty cool there. The setup there with the different incubator type businesses. I believe when it's done, it's going to be about 700 to 1,200 jobs on that campus. Which you start thinking about that and start thinking about other uses like retails and restaurants. We're starting to add a lot of jobs and a lot of add residential in this area. Another project that there isn't an application yet, but there's been discussions, is Priority Courier, and this is at 7264 50th Street. And they plan to move their headquarters from Vadnais Heights to Oakdale, be a 60,000 square foot building, 15,000 for fleet service maintenance, 15,000 fleet service maintenance facility, 93,000 square feet of warehouse, 63,000 square foot distribution center, approximately 600 parking spaces. It's got good visibility from 694, and we do expect that planning application to come forward this year.
Is this the one over by the fire station over on 50th Street? Yes. The land east of there, I believe,
Yep.
right?
Right up adjacent to 694 on the eastern side.
Okay.
Are the AUARs done?
That's something I'll have to look into of what the framework has been done. So great question. I will get back to you with an answer.
I paid attention.
The other project, which is actually quite massive here, is Tartan High School renovation. In addition, they're basically demolishing out those two basically circular round towers there, and building a pretty big new addition and improving the parking and circulation. So these projects, between this one and the Slumberland and the pet hospital, and it's really keeping our inspection team quite busy. And then you put in Willowbrook out there. There's a lot of work and a lot of inspections and that are already happening that are going to, the peak is not quite hit yet on that work, and we expect that to keep going, and we're as we move forward. Oakdale Station and Marketplace, luxury of having John on here, or David on here today, who had the intimate knowledge of what they're looking at. The 16-acre parcel is the one in the southwest corner there. It has been guided to mixed use in the comp plan. So, I know this is one where you envision a certain thing, but the market changes and dynamics change, and the way people want to live closer to amenities has changed. So there's actually a really good multifamily carriage and townhouse project that's being planned for this area. The difficulty is what John had stated, is that there's sewer capacity issues that need to get worked through, and then the contamination issue is a big thing, especially when we're talking about residential. But 3M settlement money is out there. There's a brownfield program. Ideally, we'd love to have the developer stick through this and do all this, but as of now, we're as a staff trying to educate ourselves a little bit more about what that process looks like for remediation and how long that takes, so that we can provide best advice to the private development community. And then Willowbrook, I can't go without saying Willowbrook. So that is under construction. There's new units being sent in for building permit approval. Basically, I think every day since I've been here, over Christmas week too. There wasn't a break. And this is a pretty big area. Just the area south of 40th Street. Outlet 1 has the 51 single-family homes by Lennar. Outlet 2 has the 63 townhomes by Lennar, and Outlet 3 is the 280 rental townhomes by Continental. Again, home construction it has started. It's going to keep going all the way in through next year. There are some things we need to work through on this with Ideal Avenue and working with the county on upgrades to that, and also with 40th Street with a vacation and realignment of that roadway, and some public sector improvements that are with trails and park amenities that the city is working on working with the developer under a master development agreement that was passed. So this will be a big project.
I understand there's going to be a gated community in that Willowbrook's property. Is that correct?
Yes. I think I have an image of that. So we have the carriage townhomes, example out there, the lifestyle villas, which are basically the detached townhomes, I think is also a term for them. And there's a kind of what it could look like with the rental townhomes that are, yes, behind the gated community, and that would be in basically the southeastmost corner of the Willowbrook area.
Interesting.
Maybe we'll get some professional athletes moving in,
Okay.
celebrities.
So I'm sure the houses are going to be pretty high buck in that community, correct?
Yeah, I would assume so. That's, again, a great question. I can come back with specifics on what their rates are, but yeah, I would imagine so.
It's on a barber's salary. You'll be all right.
I could cover it in a heartbeat. Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. Gold Line Bus Rapid Transit. I could talk for like 10 hours on this project, but it 10-mile dedicated bus rapid transit. So if you're out there talking to others in the community, I think one of the things to keep in mind is that dedicated component, so lanes that are just for transit, that's what gives it its permanence factor, which when the development community is looking at it and going, there's a permanent station, the bus has its own, for the most part, has its own lane to it. It's not going to be picked up and moved. It's going to provide an amenity for residents. You know, you don't have to sit and merge with the same traffic that's sitting there on the roadway. You're able to get through intersection quickly. So that's what makes it such a significant investment too in the dollar amount. In the end, it'll connect St. Paul, Maplewood, Landfall, Oakdale will have the two stations, one at Greenway and one at Helmo. I think the great thing is the small area plans, the legwork at both those has already been done, and I got a slide in the next page on Helmo where we're already seeing that, two big projects going forward. As far as when is this project actually going to happen, because I'm sure you've been hearing about it for a long time. When I started working on it, I didn't have any gray hair. That's for one thing.
Me neither.
So, it's been a while. It's basically the engineering plans are done, and it's waiting a full funding grant agreement from the FTA. There is some right-of-way acquisition that's going on. MnDOT acquires right-of-way on behalf of council. These aren't the public numbers yet, but maybe I made them public because I know construction's going to take until 2025 until it opens. There's going to be some early utility work going on this year, but really it's 2023 and 2024 are going to be the big construction seasons. And this is a rendering of the Helmo station. You see the PUD up there in the upper left-hand corner. That's really a lot of thought has gone into this, and it's revisioning from what it used to be as a business park to really creating a place. And this is one where the interest is there. I will say the transit is a factor, but that Buehlenberg-Helmo bridge going over, makes us makes that other connection into Woodbury. And, in the end, I think what the product and the design that's coming out of here is really going to be the draw, where it's going to be, people from Woodbury wanting to come up over into this area. And one of those projects, and I probably should have slipped in a rendering here tonight, but it'll be on the Planning Commission tomorrow night, is a developer that is doing to do directly across from the transit station, a 7-story apartment building with ground floor restaurant and retail and some office space within it. So it's going to be a stretch. The code goes to 6 stories. It's above what the density requirements even for that PUD are. But if you're going to make the investment in high density, being next to that transit line and having that site directly adjacent, is really the key location for it. So a great project, and having that, they call it 18-hour uses, near transit, so the restaurant or coffee element, a coffee shop, an activity going on. Those are all the things that, if you went in a textbook, this is and looked up transit-oriented development, this is a great model, and it's nice to see that move forward. But again, a lot of work, but you always say the first project, this one, and then the Cornerstone project coming in up at the corner are really, great first in type projects to set the tone for the rest of the PUD. So we're excited. Oh yeah, it's at the next slide right there, Cornerstone Village by Bethesda. They've got their approvals to move forward. They actually just are likely to be awarded a Livable Communities Development Account grant. Actually, the city will be awarded those fundings, which can help to pay for some of the public amenities that go into the site. 50 of the apartments would be affordable, and 20 of them would be market rate, 17 of which would be set aside for adults with intellectual disabilities, another 4 set aside for adults who experience homelessness. So this is, again, if you're thinking about location and transit accessibility, with transportation being, beyond housing, the number 2 cost of living driver, and potentially people that can't, having that amenity near this makes a lot of sense again. Again, I hit Greenway Station. We're starting to see some interest in here from multifamily around that station, and this is, again, the planning work has already been there and put in place. So it's the barrier is lower to get a project in here, but there isn't that first in yet to really set the tone. A little bit more challenging here with, at Greenway, you're really right up against 94. We're experiencing that at Helmo a little bit right now with its proximity. Even this new apartment building, there's noise standards, and what's that distance going to be, and what type of materials are they going to be to make sure that we're complying with the noise ordinance. So there'll be some challenges here to make this all work at Greenway, but we're excited to have interest in this already for a project that is essentially still 9 months out from construction and 3.5 years out from opening.
Well,
and that's it.
The
Yeah.
Cornerstone Village, Bethesda, I mean, it's already started. I mean, as far as residential and that type of stuff for that area, before anything has been done,
Absolutely.
which is promising. And that's it?
That's it, yeah.
Now, well, what I'd like to do is move right along to the commissioner's update, which is, again, if you've got any questions for Andy, I don't know how many meetings we're going to get you. Once you start hiring staff, I'm sure, you
Oh, I
might
love
be-
this stuff.
Oh,
My
okay.
family may not love me being at every meeting every night, but I love it.
Holly, let's go around the table.
Hi, Bill.
Hi.
I'm Holly Kep. I'm here on behalf of the Oakdale Area Chamber of Commerce. Our meeting is tomorrow at Oak Marsh. Of course, chambers are very important to the business community as well, out supporting businesses. Our next meeting will be February 3rd, if I did the numbers right. The first Thursday of February at Oak Marsh also, so just kind of here to tell you guys all about that, and welcome, Andy.
Thank you.
Just keep moving around the table.
Yep, no updates or questions.
Same, no updates or questions.
Okay.
Saw the Oakdale working on their pedestrian and bicycle trails. Washington County Parks, I know, is working on implementing a comprehensive plan for their trail system. Ultimately, you'll be able to go from north to south or south to north throughout the whole county. So to the extent that Oakdale can maybe connect with that or dovetail with that would be fantastic. So I was glad to see that on your list of items there.
Okay.
Nothing for me.
Stacy?
No updates, but welcome to the city of Oakdale.
I'm going to skip me because I've got a few, so we'll end on me. Bob?
Nothing for me.
Okay.
I have an additional further comments from my last meeting in September where I mentioned just small businesses being under pressure, with this whole COVID thing getting real long in 2 years now. I don't know if anybody caught, this is in the Star Trib just this past Sunday, that just talking about how Edina has chosen to use a piece of their American Rescue Plan Act funds, the stimulus that they received, to provide technical assistance program to 10 to 15 businesses in Edina, small businesses, 10 to 15 employees. So to help them basically promote and attract new business. I just found it interesting and mentioned that. And one of the things that, I'm seeing also is the pressure on small businesses. There was another article in the Wall Street Journal this morning about just on a national scope, that how large businesses have weathered the storm tremendously, and this whole, the great resignation that we've all been hearing about, it's impacting smaller businesses much more than it is larger businesses. And then I caught something on my P&L just recently where my basically taxes for my employees just went through the roof. There was, I mean, the number jumped off the sheet at me. So I asked my wife's the CFO, and she contacted our CPA, and it's the SUTA, it's the State Unemployment Tax Act. I laid off 4 people. I only have 4 people. I rehired them, but if you looked at what happened when we were forced to shut down the first time, all 4 of those people went on unemployment. And so there's factors involved. They extended the time that you could receive it, okay? And now, because of the depletion of the fund, they're raising our modifiers. And so I'm seeing this, we're talking tripling. And we're talking $2,500 a year. And I'm a small business. I got 4 employees, okay? So could you imagine if you're a restaurant, somebody with 20, 30 employees, 50, 80, okay? So I just, anything we can do, I just think is, if we're going to invest money or help small businesses stay, we're looking to attract people, which is great. But, helping the ones that are under pressure in our community and seeking out maybe that information. And, I'd be willing to volunteer to approach the council on that and see if there's any thoughts on ways we could, help them out in a concrete way. It doesn't have to be what Edina's doing, but anyway, they're just some thoughts.
And I know with Andy coming on board, something on his agenda is also to get out into the business community and knock on doors, and I'm sure we'll be involved with that to see if there's something we can do to help. And but I'm sure that's going to be coming down the road also.
Yeah.
Great idea.
And I mean, I don't have any, I'm new. It's my second meeting. Just, I found it interesting. Mm-hmm. And as a small business owner, it's like, my heart, it's not easy out there. And just staying open for a lot of people. And as I mentioned, the retail, retail stores, restaurants, bars, oh my gosh. And it's continuing. Whoever thought we'd have Omicron? Good gosh. Yeah. When is this thing going to end? So, I'll shut up now.
Frank Orsello, I own the Cavalier Barber and Beauty Salon. I got 3 people working for me, but thank God they're independent contractors, so I don't have to worry about unemployment or paying taxes or anything else. And that's a godsend, I'll tell you. It's really a wonderful situation. So, yeah, I've been on the EDC since 1985, I think it was. I'm one of the original founders of it. I know you can't tell by my hair or anything, but it's a little gray, but a little grayer when I started. But anyway, that's it.
Oh, all right. Thank you, Frank. Andy, I just got some questions on the dates of completion for the home furniture and the animal emergency. Is it something that'll be done in 2022, you think? I think so, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. I know I drive by them every day. Question on the Forefront Technology Office Campus. I was lucky enough to be there one time, and it was an unbelievable facility. And with the fact that they're changing the model in there to where it might be retail, I think it'd be something where we can do a field trip, and if they'd be willing to get us to take a tour through that, and so we can get a handle on what's going on and spread the good news, if that can be possible. And that probably would be for any of these sites where they're new going in and at completion. If we could get a little tour of it, that'd be great. That kind of stuff. The Willowbrook is, can't wait for it to be done over there. Do you know if there's any bike and pedestrian plans for in that area?
There are trails throughout. There are little park outlets. There are 3 big parks. The city is responsible for the park planning, which is unusual with the development. That was negotiated, so we are going to start that. In fact, we've been talking to our consultant to work on an engagement for that. But there are trails and parks. In fact, I think we have a good visual that we could email to you. It's a good visual of where all the trails are and the parks and how it's going to look with the gated community on one side, and you all might be interested in that. So we have a really good visual, actually. We could email it to you. So,
Yeah. Is there any talk of, so this year there'll be a home completed in there. There'll be maybe numerous. Why don't we make it a big deal about the very first home that's done and the people are moving in, give them a bunch of gifts from local small businesses here in Oakdale. Welcome to the community and congratulations on being the first home in this complex. I think that'd be a good idea.
that's a great idea. In fact, they're building through the winter, which is a change, and that just happened the last 30 days. They were going to, they broke ground, or they wanted all the sewer and the water, and we were getting all that ready, and then they were going to pause till March, April. They decided there's so much demand for that new housing, because Oakdale hasn't had new housing, that they decided to build through the winter. So the first home will be done very quickly here, and then they're going to just keep going, and then there'll be the parade of homes coming up in the spring. So are you thinking waiting for the new home to sell or the new home to be completed?
I'd say the new buyers coming in with the key and opening the door.
Well, that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, and I know the chamber would love to get involved with that too and get all kinds of things going.
Yeah, that goes along the line, you mentioned this earlier, I'm glad you brought it up, that Andy is going to spend a lot of time working on business retention and development, partnering with the chamber and so forth, and we should do more in that regard. So, yeah, that sounds great.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. I think that's all I got. Any other questions, concerns? Well, with that, I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting. So I get a second? Hey, I get to do it. End of the meeting. Here we go.